Hear us. Our African voices speak across a vast continent.
Our voices speak of many cultures.
Hello, and welcome to African Voices, a live electronic field trip in the African Voices exhibit of the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of Natural History. This field trip is brought to you by Project View under the direction of the Schenectady City School District through a grant from the Technology Innovation Challenge grant awarded by the U.S. Department of Education. My name is Dottie, and I'm going to be your host through this electronic field trip. I'd like to introduce you to some of the other voices we're going to hear during this broadcast. I have students with me here from Central Park Middle School and Guilderland High School. Hi guys, and welcome.
Hello.
And I see you have some things here with you. Can someone tell me what you've brought?
It is called an call from Somalia. The Somalians live in it.
So it's a kind of house?
Yes.
Okay. And why is it in pieces?
Because we have not built it yet.
So it's a house that has to be built. Why do they have to build it like this?
So they can live under it and they'll be secure in certain weather.
And because they move from location to location as they move their animals and look for new pastures and look for watering sources.
Yep.
So you are going to be building the sakal for us today, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay. What are you going to build it out of?
Well, the real things that they use to build are they use burlap to cover and make sure all the weather doesn't get in their house, and sticks and yarn to wrap the sticks together.
And what do you guys have here today?
This is foam and Velcro to keep the things attached and tape.
Okay, I'm going to leave you to begin building your akal, and then we're going to check back with you a little later on in the show and see how you're doing. Okay? This is a live, interactive field trip. Okay? And you'll see at the bottom of your screen there should be a 1-800 number and an email address. You can use them to call or write us and ask questions of our scientists and our experts. And when you call in, you'll need to turn the sound on your monitor down. Okay? And we'll run this 1-800 number and the email address periodically throughout the broadcast. What we're going to do now is we're going to start the broadcast by giving you some general important information about Africa, to introduce us to Africa. Okay? And then we will move to some more personal stories about Africa. So this next video introduces us to the African continent.
Africa is the birthplace of humankind. From the motherland, we have ventured into the world. Sometimes with the joy of discovery, sometimes in sorrow. Our spirit and knowledge enabled us to persevere.
Hi, my name is Michael Mason. I'm an anthropologist here at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History. I was fortunate enough to work on the exhibit team that developed this exhibition, African Voices. We went through a long process of consultation with people around the country and around the world to work out a consensus about what Americans should know about Africa. The result of that process is what's on exhibition here at the museum, and it's also the basis of the field trip that we're bringing to you today. Because the continent is such a large and diverse place, it's really important to understand that we had to focus on specific messages. And that's how we organized the choices that we made about what to include in this field trip and in the exhibition. First of all, we focused on Africa's diversity and dynamism, both in the past and in contemporary times. So the stories that you'll hear today will explore those issues. We wanted to show over and over again global connections that Africa has with the rest of the world. We wanted to surprise visitors. As you probably know, there are a lot of stereotypes about Africa, and the exhibition and the field trip are designed to surprise you about what's going on the continent. And finally, we also wanted to show Africans as the primary actors in their lives. So over and over again, in the hall and in this field trip, you'll get to see Africans talking about their history and their culture and why it's important to them. Now, I also want to give you some general information about Africa. As Dadi said, Africa is an enormous continent. It's about 3 times the land mass of the United States. To give you a sense of how big that is, it takes about 5 hours to fly from New York City to Los Angeles on the opposite coast. And it takes about 15 hours to fly from Cairo, Egypt in North Africa to Johannesburg in South Africa. So it's a much, much larger continent, much wider than North America. The diversity in Africa is really astounding. You need to keep in mind that Africa isn't a country, but a continent made up of 54 different countries. And within those countries, there are more than 800 languages spoken, more than 1,000 ethnic groups, and close to 800 million people. Now, to talk about dynamism in Africa today, we have with us we're very fortunate to have with us a really outstanding guest, Georges Collinet, who's an ethnomusicologist and a radio producer of Afropop Worldwide, which aired on the Voice of America for more than 25 years. Georges, can you tell us something about dynamism in African music?
Sure. As you were mentioning, Michael, Africa is not a country, it's a continent. And on that continent, we have some the music over there is as diverse as the people of Africa. And a lot of people think that African music is just tom-toms and drums and so on and so forth. But in fact, music in Africa comes out of the village. And it's the music that the kids are listening to, the mothers and the grandmothers are playing that type of music. And they take that music and they adapt it to modern instruments that were brought by the people from Europe. And they have adapted this music, these instruments so well that they sound now like the traditional instruments, and that's what makes it so fascinating. And you have, as I said, so many different music styles, but we have divided them in 4 parts. So we're going to listen to, let's say, the music from West Africa. All right, so Chris and Tiana, you just heard that music from West Africa. What do you think of?
Very fun. Something you were listening to.
And Chris?
It had a lot of drums in it, like maracas and other things.
Well, actually, the music from West Africa is there is a common thing going on underlining it. It's the music of the griots. The griots were the troubadours. They were the historians at the courts of the the Mandingo emperors, and they were telling the history of the empire, and they use an instrument called a kora. Kora is a 21-string harp lute that is played all throughout this region of Africa. Therefore, it gives it that link, I suppose, between the different countries of West Africa. Now we're going to go to Central Africa. Well, you saw that, Chris, you were dancing. You like that, eh?
Yeah, it sounds like music that comes from Latin America and the Caribbean.
And Taylor?
A lot of maracas, stuff that you like to dance to.
You like to dance to, right? Actually, it's one of the most popular music in Africa. It's the soukous that you've heard there. And this is the music of the people of the Congo. I mean, there were also some makossa from my country, the Cameroon. And it has a link. It's that pulsating rhythm, and that you find also in Latin America, in the Americas, and it's called now Latin American music. So it comes from there. Now let's go to South Africa. Well, that's totally different, right?
Yeah, it is. It sounds like music that you dance to, like at a party or a wedding.
Basically the same thing. It's like used to celebrate, something you listen to for celebrating.
Well, that's what it is. But you've noticed also that there's a lot of vocals there, right? And that's because in the 1800, American troubadours used to go to South Africa and play around. Present their show there. And so the South Africans loved it and adapted it to their own style of music called mbakanga. Now we're going to go to North Africa and East Africa, and we're going to go live with Hassan Touré. Well, bravo, bravo. Hassan, this instrument looks like a medieval lute. It's the oud, right?
This is an oud, and this is from
North Africa, originated from Egypt, but has spread to all North Africa, Northeast Africa, and to the Middle East.
And you learned to play, you're from Somalia, first of all, we should say that.
Yes.
And you learned to play this instrument when you were a kid?
I learned to play when I was 11 years old by watching older boy taking a lesson to learn how to.
Really?
Yes.
It was that popular in Somalia?
In music, it's popular, but to play as a student, it might not be very popular.
But did you have a hard time learning this? Because I know that in Africa, parents don't like their kids to be musicians.
That was the difficult part of it. I had a fun playing it and learning it outside of the house, but I never had the chance to have the instrument in the house. I always went to somewhere else to play.
What do the word say in this music, in your music?
In my music, it tells some stories, it tells some events, it talks about life, and it tells a story, basically.
Okay, well, we're going to see you again a little later on, and we're going to move on to Dottie, you're on.
Thank you, George, and thank you, Hassan, for that beautiful performance. I have with me two students. I have Jessica and Carol, and we just heard Hassan talking about his experience as a child learning to play a musical instrument. Do either one of you play?
Yes, we do. I play the flute, and I play piano.
And what were some of the similarities you heard in the music that we just listened to and to music that you listen to today?
Well, one of the biggest similarities was that all music is about emotion. It can be about pride, it can be something sad, but it's all about how you feel.
What about you, Carol?
I know that personally, I really felt that the Central African music was really great. You know, it had a really good beat, it had a good rhythm. It reminded me a lot of the Caribbean music, and it had a real tropical feeling to it, and it was very danceable-like.
And I liked hearing how it was the music from Central Africa that's influenced the Caribbean music and the Latin American music. It really goes to show the global impact that Africa has.
Right.
What were some of the differences you noticed?
Well, one of the biggest differences was the presence of drums. That's not as typical. We have a lot of synthesizers and other guitars and instruments, but the drums made it sound more traditional.
Yeah, I noticed like a lot of a cappella, a lot of voices, which is, you know, a little bit different.
Okay, I have an email question from Kane. Kane wants to know, do kids have lots of activities to do in Africa? Why don't we go to Michael, and maybe he can bring in Hassan to answer this question for us.
Hassan, the question is what kinds of activities children engage in Africa?
They engage a lot of different things. They engage playing games, swimming, playing soccer, and also being part of their family, running certain chores.
So play and work, both?
Both.
Back to you, Dottie.
I have another email question from Allie at the Albany Academy. She wants to know what people in the Democratic Republic of Congo call the Democratic Republic of Congo. Do they call it that, or do they have a special name for it? Michael, can you help us with that question?
Sure. The Democratic Republic of Congo is the official name of the country that has Kinshasa as its capital. So it's sometimes referred to as Congo-Kinshasa, just to make it easier. It's important to differentiate it from the Republic of Congo next door, which is a smaller country whose capital is Brazil. Brazzaville. And it's sometimes referred to as Congo-Brazzaville.
Okay. Africa has a long, diverse history that begins with the origins of humankind and leads up to contemporary challenges today. This next video we're going to look at shows us some of these moments in time.
History surrounds us. Our ancestors' voices are a source of strength and wisdom.
Even today, their trials and triumphs guide us.
I'm Mary Jo Arnoldi. I'm an anthropologist here at the Smithsonian, and I think I have the best job at the Smithsonian because I get to work in Africa. And when I've traveled throughout Africa and talked to Africans on the continent and here in Washington, one of the things that always comes up is their pride in African history. It's a long and dynamic history, and they've been connected to the world for thousands of years. From the great empires on the Nile Valley of Egypt and Nubia, to their neighbor Ethiopia, to the West African kingdoms, to kingdoms in Central Africa and in Southern Africa. And I bet you didn't know that some of those kingdoms are still alive and well today in Africa. One of those kingdoms is the Kingdom of Benin in the present-day country of Nigeria. And behind me is a photograph of the king or Oba of Benin, who was crowned in 1997. Benin, he's the 35th king in an unbroken line of kings that date back to the 15th century. And that's the period we want to look at today, because in the 1400s, Europeans started sailing for the first time down the coast of Africa. And why don't you come with me, and we'll go ask our historian and expert, Linda Haywood, about just why did Europeans come down the coast of Africa? Linda?
Well, Mary, the first Europeans to come to West Africa were the Portuguese, and they came for three things. The three G's: God, gold, and glory.
God, gold, and glory.
Yes. And when they went to the Gold Coast, the region they call Costa da Mina, the coast of gold, they did find the gold. A few years later, they went down to Central Africa and found some kingdoms in Central Africa.
What kingdoms were in Central Africa,
Well, the
Linda?
two main kingdoms or states which they encountered were the state of the Kingdom of Congo, which was a state already in existence before the Portuguese came. It's now in the northern part of the country called Angola. And they also found in Angola another kingdom called the Kingdom of Ndongo.
And what was the relationship of Congo and Ndongo to the Portuguese, and who ruled?
Well, one of the things that the Portuguese tried to do at first, they wanted to get God in, so they converted the king and the Kingdom of Congo. And the Congolese did not want the Portuguese to control their kingdom. So what the Portuguese did was to ally themselves with the Congolese, help them, and in fact slaves come out of that. Some of the first slaves from Central Africa came from the Kingdom of the Congo. Then the Portuguese went just lower south and went to the region of Luanda in the Kingdom of Ndongo, and they in fact controlled a part of the Kingdom of Ndongo.
And who was the ruler of Ndongo?
Well, the ruler of Ndongo was called Angola, but he had some the title of the king was Angola. But the person who really played a very important role during this period was a famous, just incredible female called Queen Jinga. Some of you might have heard that name, Njinga, because some kids in America have that name.
Oh, what was her relationship with the Portuguese? Good, bad?
Well, Jinga played the Portuguese for all she could get. Sometimes she played them as if she was an ally, so she converted to Christianity. Other times, when the Portuguese broke their treaty, she would in fact try to align herself with some of the Portuguese enemies in her own kingdom, and in fact try to align herself with the Dutch who were there, as well as with the Congolese. So we have an incredible woman who was able to change when she saw it in her interest.
And her reputation and her memories lived on and on.
Yeah, in fact, her reputation, even during her life, people said, this is an incredible woman. When she went to make a treaty with the Portuguese did not want to give her a seat. She, in fact, called one of her maids and had them sit on their hands and feet, and she sat on the back. She wanted to be at the same status as the Portuguese. Also, she was in the front of her army. She was very good at the bow. She also denied some of the men, she did not want them to dress as men. She wanted to control them. But they respected her, they praised her, and she was very good in fact, keeping her kingdom, the kingdom that she established called Matamba. She was very good at controlling that. She left Matamba to her sister, and what she also did was to leave memory of her, because what you had was, in fact, she's remembered in Angola today as
How is she remembered, Linda? in Angola?
In Angola, she's remembered as a nationalist hero, a resistance fighter against the Portuguese. When the Angolans became independent in 1975, they named a street after. And
we have some questions here. Dottie, we're going to throw it to Dottie, who'll give us the questions.
Okay, thanks, Mary Jo. We have some email questions. Zach wants to know, what is the dominant religion of Africa? Mary Jo and Linda, can you answer this for Zach?
Repeat the question, Dottie.
What is the dominant religion of Africa?
What's the dominant religion of Africa, Linda?
Well, not Africa as a whole. In Angola, it is, in fact, 3 religions. We have the Catholic religion. We have, in fact, various Protestant religions, and we also have indigenous African religion, independent African religions.
And elsewhere in Africa, Islam plays an important role, as well as other religions.
In West Africa, Islam is very important. In Southern Africa, we have various African religions and Christianity.
Okay, Dottie, do you have another question?
I do. I have an email question from Brandon at the Albany Academy. Brandon wants to know if the cultures of Ethiopia and Somalia are the same in any way. Mary Jo and Linda, can you answer this for Brandon?
Well, the Ethiopia and Somalia they've been in contact for many, many thousands of years, and they share certain life ways. They both have their own sense of their own individual histories, and so they both share and have individuality. Dottie?
Okay, thank you, Mary Jo. I'm here with our students who have finished building their akal, and what we're looking at is a cross-section of the akal, so it's sliced down the middle, and you can see inside of it. If I can get Carol to explain a little bit about the process of building it.
Well, basically, we started with foam pipes, and there are 6 major pieces, and they're connected together by Velcro pieces.
And what's the significance of these pieces that are in the middle?
The arcs help make it sturdy so that it stays with bad weather and other events.
And why do you have the burlap?
The burlap is to keep all the rain and things from inside of the house.
And what else could be used to cover the akal?
Matting, like that's weaved. It has like a design on the back. I think I saw straw on the one in the exhibit over there.
And families used different materials to build their akals, and that's what made each akal sort of unique to that family and said something about that family. Okay, guys, what I'm going to need you to do is break down this akal. But before we do that, can you tell me how long it took you to build it?
It took us about, I'd say, 4 to 5 minutes this time.
Pretty easy to assemble. Yes. What I'm going to need you to do now is take it apart and move. Okay, we need to move the animals to a new pasture, find a new source of water. So we're going to have you reset up the akal in a different location than the exhibit, and then we're going to come back to you and check on that. Okay? Just as in the United States, there are lots of different jobs, lots of different ways of working for Africans, and there are lots of different kinds of wealth. Wealth can be in the form of money or knowledge or connections between people. We're going to look at a video now that highlights some of the different kinds of jobs people can have and some of the different ways they value this wealth.
Hi, it's Michael Mason again, and we're in the market crossroads of the exhibition. I'm here with Peter Papim, who's originally from Ghana, and The footage that you just saw is from a market in Ghana, from the city of Accra. Peter, can you help the students understand something about how markets work in Ghana?
A market, it's an open air stalls and a very vibrant place. You hear many, many languages going on at the same time. It's the place where you can buy, sell, or trade. So it's a very important nerve of economy.
So you've got all that kind of exchange, things coming in and out. And it happens that we have a phone call coming in from Massachusetts right now. Nancy, are you there?
Yes.
What's your question?
My question is, I was watching this program and it was very interesting to me. But as a Cape Verdean American, I was wondering why, when you were describing Africa, and especially during the musical portion, they did not mention the Cape Verde Islands and the influence of their music throughout Europe and all. I mean, after all, the islands are called the islands of Cape Verde.
Yeah, we were looking at different kinds of music from around Africa. So we went to West Africa, to Central Africa, to Southern Africa, and to Northern Africa. Unfortunately, it's not possible for us to visit all 56 countries in Africa in an hour program. But it's true that Cape Verde has just tremendous music, which had been deeply influenced by music from Portugal and has had a very powerful influence in the United States. Now, Peter's going to talk to us about cloth in Ghana. We'd like to talk about 3 different kinds of cloth. And Peter, can you help us understand the way people use cloth to communicate? It's a way of presenting themselves to their neighbors and their friends.
Absolutely. We find that in universal world, we need clothing for many reasons, either to warm ourselves or to protect our bodies. In Ghana situation, we wear clothing to illustrate, one, not only aesthetics or to beautify your body, but also to demonstrate what event one is attending. The color perceptions are quite important, as well as the designage of the cloth, because most of them are symbolic. What we have here are blue and white, which is basically colors for celebrating a birth of a child, or a naming of a child, or wedding, any occasion which is very happy ending, those colors are used.
How about the other wax prints that we have, the multicolored prints?
The multicolored prints are doing ideally what the black and white, the black and blue, the white and blue are doing, but except that those are a little bit vibrant in terms of the colors that are incorporated in them. But when it gets a little bit darker, then of course it goes into different level where funeral comes in.
Now, each cloth has a different name, right? A proverbial name or a symbol, has symbols on it that refer to proverbs. Can you talk about the proverbs that are on your cloth?
Sure, I can do. There's a cloth that's popularly known as a dinkra. A dinkra literally means bidding farewell or saying goodbye. It was intended to be used in the past as a funeral cloth. What are illustrated in this textile is that every design that is seen in this are stamped. And the stamps are made of calabash and then dipped into badia, bark of a tree, which is cooked and mixed into ink. There are proverbs, or there are symbolic expressions in them. The first of all, let's begin with this one, which is known as Jinyame. Jinyame literally means the omnipotence of God, symbolizing reliance and also safety, because you believe in the Creator, and therefore your life will never come to an end, because if God die, then you will die. If God is alive, you will live. So it's a symbol that expresses reliance and also strength and power.
So when you're going to an event, you actually think about the visual effect that you want to have, but also the proverbs that would be carried on the cloth.
Precisely, you're thinking about what message you want to convey to the event that you are attending. Being a wedding or being a funeral, you are thinking about what you want to convey. And if you are a rich person, then you can have many of these with a specific design incorporated into it. But if you are poor like me, then you have many designs in one so that you can illustrate more than one symbol.
And that way you can wear the cloth to different kinds of events.
Exactly, depending upon the color scheme. If it's brighter, then it's wedding and others. If it's darker, then it's for funeral.
I see. Let's go over here. We've got some students with us who've been thinking about and working on cloth for a while. We have Gabby, Monique, and their teacher Nancy. Can you talk to us about the cloths that you've been working on?
Yes, this one is a cloth of a hairstyle for a war hero, and this one is the Sankofa, which means wisdom of learning from the past.
Could you hold them up so that the cameras can get a good shot of them? And how did you make these bags? How did you make the cloth?
Well, the cloth was already there. We just made stamps. We cut them out of sponges, and then we dipped them into printer's ink, and we printed on the bags.
We're going to demonstrate how the students did this. You can cut out your design, you can choose your pattern, and you can cut them out of either compressed sponges, you can use foam, you can use the top of a styrofoam egg carton, you could even use potatoes, and of course you could use gourds as they did in Africa. You can also attach something to make the handle a little bit easier, and you can reuse these stamps over and over again. We're printing on a cloth. You could certainly print on a piece of paper. You could make them into wrapping paper or bags, t-shirts, or these are usable. The students have made bags that they can carry things around in.
It seems like you have a very interest in coming from Africa, and we just want to ask you a few questions about how did you get interest in these designs?
Well, this one has to do with hair of war and power, and I'm really interested in hair, and I could say that in some ways my brother used to say that I'm a lot of powerful, so I like this.
I see. So your emphasis for picking up this design is the power elements about it.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you look at the design before you developed the interest, or you had the context of it or the meaning of it before?
We had it at the same time.
At the same time?
Yeah.
So you're combining both visual and also philosophical?
Yes.
All right. What about you? You got a design which is different than hers. How did you choose yours?
I just really like the design, knowing that it looks sort of like a heart.
Okay. What's the name of your design?
The Sankofa.
Sankofa. Okay. Literally meaning retrieving from the past. Did you know about that meaning before you chose that?
No, I didn't.
You didn't know, but you are just a visual expressionist. You like the design composition, and you chose that one. That's interesting. I believe that when you're carrying this, if people ask you who made it, how are you going to tell? What are you going to tell them?
I don't know.
You don't know? No. Did you make it yourself?
Yeah, I made it myself.
That's what I'm implying. Okay. You made this yourself. So the next question is that if it happens that why they ask you the same question, why did you choose these designs? Then you're going to tell them what?
Because I like the design.
You like the design.
Now, Peter, the Sankofa refers back to the importance of the past, a theme that we've been talking about a lot today. Mm-hmm. We also have an example here in the exhibition of a coffin from Ghana made by Ga people around Accra. And I was hoping you could talk a little bit about how the funeral is also a way of looking back and honoring the past.
Okay. One thing we have to understand is that if there was no yesterday, we wouldn't have today, and maybe there will be no tomorrow. Sankofa literally means retrieving from the past, will signify that our forebears have left some knowledge with us, and we can always go back to them and retrieve this knowledge to make our today a meaningful day. In other words, if I'm going to a funeral and I would like to reflect, the essence of their wisdom, I may choose to wear a design composition in a dinkra with Sankofa in it to illustrate the fact that they have left me something that I would like to use in the present day.
And someone who's had a life of wealth and privilege might choose to be buried in a coffin that looks like an airplane to express that life. Now we're going back to Dottie. and she'll take some questions, I think.
Thanks, Michael. I have an email question from Kirsten Garvey at Brownsville Junior High School. She wants to know if Africans wear the same things as Americans. And we just saw Michael and Peter talking about some of the cloths that are made by Africans and how they wear them. But my question is, Peter and Michael, are there any cases where Africans do wear the same things as Americans do?
Africans actually wear the same kinds of clothes as Americans in lots of different places. Peter, what's standard wear in Kumasi, where your family's from?
What's standard?
The question is whether there are places in Africa where they wear the same kinds of clothes as Americans.
Of course, yes. Everyday wear, it's T-shirts and shirts, and people who dress in suits to go to work and so forth. It depends upon the nature of work that you do. But when it comes to a setting where one has to be formal, you see more of traditional in outfits than a regular day outfit. But of course, when it comes to the market women, they are always in their traditional outfit.
Okay, thanks. Back to you, Dottie.
Thanks, Michael. I have another email here from Phil. Phil wants to know, at what age is a kid seen as an adult, and what responsibilities do the kids have? Michael and Peter, can we get you to answer this question for Phil?
Sure. Remember, Africa, again, is a continent and not a country. There are thousands of different cultures in Africa, and so it depends a great deal on where you're talking about. We'll be talking in a little bit about Somalia, but maybe Peter can talk about Fanti culture and when a child becomes an adult.
When a child becomes an adult, number one, we go through stages of life: birth, living, and death. For a child to become an adult, you think about the age between 14 and above. How do we determine? It's determined by your experiences in life and your accomplishments in life between the age of between 14 and 18. So at the 18, then of course, I won't put age on it, but the accomplishment. We have a saying that if a child learns how to wash his or her hands well, that child can partake food with an adult.
So there's some sense of what they're capable of as individuals that helps determine whether or not they're seen as an adult.
And the community will judge by what you do.
Great. Back to you, Dottie.
Thanks, Michael and Peter. Just as in America, there's a great diversity in Africa and different ways of living. And since Africa is such a large continent, there are many, many different ways of living. What we're going to do now is look at a video that introduces us to some of these different ways.
Hi, you've just been looking at Ghana with Peter and Michael. Now we're going to take a look at another country, Somalia, which is in the northeast of Africa. Somalia is about a little bit smaller than Texas, and it has about 9,500,000 people living there, and that's about maybe the size of the city of Houston itself. Somalia is a very ancient country which has been connected around the world for thousands of years. It was connected to Egypt, it was connected to the Middle East, it was connected to India and to China, well before Europeans actually came to Somalia. And one of the lifestyles that we're going to look at today in Somalia that's very ancient but also very contemporary is nomadic herding life, where families move with their herds over a period of weeks to new pasture land and new water sites. Let's see what it means for a nomadic person, or what Somalia means, what pride they have in nomadic life. Let's look at this little film here.
When I think of Somalia, I think of the three most important things in my culture: poetry, camels, and the akal. As a Somali American, this will always be part of my life.
So you've just seen Abdi on film, and we've got Abdi here to answer all your questions.
Okay.
Abdi, you grew up in a nomadic camp and moved with your family and herding camels and sheep and goats. Can you tell us what that life was like?
Yes, I have a fond memories of my nomadic life as a child, especially when it's a rainy season. It's a good life in the nomadic life. You have a water and a pasture for the animals. It's the times that we have a fun as a children and play games and wrestle. And we play with bows and arrows. We play wrestle. Similar, we have a same game as children here. We play, hide and seek and similar games. However, there are times that life is difficult, especially when it's a dry season.
And what happens then?
Well, the families have constantly to move from place to place in search of water and a pasture for the animals.
And you move your houses each time the family moves.
Each time you have to move the akal, which fits to the life of the nomadic. It's suitably built to fit that life. It's built by women mostly. It's ingenuity of a woman.
Always good.
To design the akal. It's portable. It can fit into the back of a camel, 1 or 2 camels. And
I know that you said in the piece in the film that the akal is almost a symbol of nomadic life, just like the camel is.
It is. It's a focal point of a nomadic life. It's where the home is. And although the nomadic families move from place to place, the akal gives the nomadic life a sense of a permanence.
Okay, so there's permanence in movement.
Yes.
What would you find in a house, and what do people take with you?
And, well, as you see the akal behind me, and this is the shape that it is dome-like a building, and when you look at it from the surface, it doesn't look good, but when you go inside, it's very beautiful. A lot of we're getting. The materials that you have in are all essential. You don't carry non-essential things with akal because you have to put it on the back of a camel. So we have a containers here, wooden containers that you have a milk and a water, which is essential.
And what do you have, mats on the floor? Is that where you would sleep?
Exactly, that's where you sleep. Here we have a headrest for the camel boy to have a nap in the middle of the day when they are
Did you ever watch the camels and use the headrest?
Yes.
Okay.
We have a wooden containers here and for the women to put essential things that they use, including incense, which women use.
And I also see there's a radio back there.
Somalis are very informed society. Even the nomadic people listen radios, so they have a portable shortwave radios, and they listen BBC Somali service to get news of the world.
Well, let's look at how the house actually goes up. And this is a house that was being put up here in the Smithsonian with the help of the Somali community, women from the Somali community here in Washington. What are they doing here in this film? Well, I see Hassan's in it too.
what you see is the akal being peeled, and those are the sticks that made the fundamentals of the akal. It's called the udbo. They are grounded on the earth, few inches deep.
Here we had to put them in buckets of sand, but when you're actually in Somalia, they're driven into the earth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're driven into the earth, and they are tied together by ropes and ropes made of hides and skin of the cattle or a camel.
And then to cover it finally, what we'll see them doing is unrolling these beautiful mats.
Exactly.
That are made by women.
Exactly.
And women actually sing songs to their mats.
Yeah, they have a work songs when they are weaving the mats. A lot of we're getting to this. Sometimes it's built for a long time, and it's something that women learn from early on in their life to build those mats.
And I see our nomadic family has arrived here in another part of Somalia. How was it? Taking it down and putting it up again?
It was good. Okay, what do you have it here?
That's very valuable to us.
Okay, what are they?
There is a bunny rabbit, that was mine. There's her picture of them too, because they're best friends.
Okay,
Just some
okay.
keepsakes, yeah.
Okay, well in the nomadic house.
Can you put your mic to the kids? Yeah.
In the nomadic house, you would often have a water container that's very essential, like you have those essentials here. How long did it take you to build this?
About 4 to 5 minutes. It went very fast this time.
And the one in the nomadic, it often takes about 3 to 4 hours to build the one. And do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, I have one question. Does if it's raining or if there's a sandstorm, does that affect how long it takes the women to put up in a call?
Yes, actually, the agility of the akal, how sturdy it is, defines the woman. So they're very careful in the beginning when they're building it. They have to have the right materials, the right sticks, which are durable, so that it can endure the torrential rains, the winds, and it can stay for a long time.
We know that many Somalis, about 60%, still live in a nomadic herding life, but also Somalis live in town. And let's go ask Hassan, who grew up in town, what life was like growing up in a Somali town.
Somali town is like any other any other cities in the world. You grow up in going to school and you go to movies, you play soccer, you swim, you hang out with your friends in your neighborhoods, just like any other kid will do.
Well, I heard that someone told me that town kids and nomadic kids used to have a lot of joking relationships. So what do you think about town kids?
Well, that's true, Mary. We consider them nomadic children. We consider town kids are very soft. They cannot endure the harsh life that we do. They're afraid of predators like lions and hyenas, which we don't afraid of. So we consider them very soft.
So what do the town kids say back?
Town kids say if the nomads come to town, they don't know how to use the little gadgets. They don't know how to turn the stove on. They don't know how to turn the light on. They have no clue what's going on in the house.
So part of the fun, all joking aside, part of the fun is teasing one another. But what really unites town people and country people is this great tradition of Somali music, Somali poetry, and Somali art. And Hassan, would you share some of that music with us? Yes. And while Hassan is playing, we'll take a look at a film which will let all of you see what the great diversity of Somali life is. Thank you, Hassan, and we're not going to let you get away with this. Can you give us another short piece?
Yes.
Baby
نبتي ماضي عن وينتا بويان با وان وهاي بناي
Thank you, Hassan. And now we're going to go back to Dottie, who's going to wrap this up for you.
Thanks, Mary Jo. I do have a couple of email questions here. Jordan wants to know, what sports do people play? And Kane has a similar question. Do kids have lots of activities to do in Africa? So let's go to Mary Jo, and maybe she can get Abdi and Hassan to talk a little bit about the sports and the activities that kids play.
We have a question about what do kids play. Maybe you and Hassan, Abdi, can talk about what kids play.
Well, soccer is one of the favorable sports in Somalia. Almost every child would love to play soccer.
And that's probably true all over Africa.
Yeah. And there are other traditional games that play. In the nomadic life, we don't have a soccer. Normally, we will play other games, like traditional games.
Okay.
But in the cities, they also have a basketball and similar games that you have here. In terms of shores, the nomadic children tend to be, do a lot of things. They tend after, the goats and sheep and calves.
So it's chores and games together.
Exactly.
Okay, Dottie, do you have another question? Back to Dottie.
I do, Mary Jo. Nikki Landon wants to know, do most people in Africa have children of their own?
The question is, do most people in Africa have children of their own? And I think that Abdi, who's a new dad, can answer how important children are to Africans. I think you can speak for all of Africa here.
I think family is a central unit of most of African society. Family is valued, and so does marriage and marriage life. So it's the hope of every able man to get married and have a children.
And every woman to have children.
And every woman to have a children, and so raise, and so families stay longer.
Okay.
And it's actually taboo in some cultures to get divorced. So they tend to stay longer.
Together.
Together.
Okay, thank you, Abdi, for sharing that with us, and back to Dottie.
Thanks, Mary Jo. And this brings us to the conclusion of our electronic field trip, African Voices. I'd like to thank our Smithsonian scientists and our experts who are here with us today, as well as the students who are here with us in the exhibit. And I'd like to thank you for watching and for calling in with your questions and your emails. I'd like to thank the sponsors of this program, Project View, Schenectady City School District, the Smithsonian Institution, and Ball State University. And I'd like to invite you to join us in May when we go to Mali in Africa to do our next live electronic field trip.